r/Askreddit by Reddit and chill. Ever learned something that made you go how the heck did humans figure that out? If so, what is your prime example of that? Do you know how much work it takes to make chocolate edible? Same with olives. Lots of work. Very determined people. Just learned today on this very sub that the Jimpy, also known as the suicide plant for very fitting reasons, has edible fruits as long as the toxic hairs are all pulled out. Also on this sub, the word Jimpy is a generic swear word, and in that language repeating a swear is supposed to increase its meaning tenfold. So someone tried eating the fruits of a plant that's more or less named duck. Almonds. These almonds will kill you. These identical looking almonds won't. Choose wisely. Well, I mean, we can extrapolate how we found out. Coffee. Who thought to pluck the seed from a coffee tree berry, roast it, then grind it, then mix it with boiling water, then filter out the grounds? That process must have taken centuries to perfect. I actually know this. Goat herders noticed how their goats went nuts after eating the coffee beans. So that's how they figured out what kind of effect coffee has. Things like roasting, grinding, etc. were discovered by trial and error over time. Transistors. It's changed the world, and yet it's unthinkable how humans figured something like that out. According to my old lecturer, transistors were something that were actually implied to exist by maths first, so they went about trying to make them because the math said they should exist. The MF that first tried cheese was a brave man. He's a hero, in fact. He could have kept all the cheese to himself. Spoken language in general. If I utter a lot of noises in a very specific order, you understand my thoughts. I understand evolution. Both social and biological. But it still blows my mind. Yo, I always wonder how certain words came into existence. Like when languages started developing, every time when someone saw something new you just make up a word. Weaving with a loom has always been fascinating to me. They date back to 5000 BC. Bread. How someone thought to get wheat and other stuff and then bake it. That and beer. I think someone forgot about some dough and it rose from the natural yeast. Well, fairly certain that's what I watched in a Netflix document. The one that was about food and air, fire, water and something else. Likely fermentation. What's inside the earth? I read somewhere that if you imagine the earth as an apple, we haven't even drilled past the skin yet. So how do they know? Earthquakes, plate tectonics cause ripples that can be detected nearly planet-wide with special instruments. This helps us math our way through a lot of the stuff we haven't physically drilled to. Our magnetic field also points to certain makeup of the earth. Cameras. That shit blows my mind. Right? Like, let me look through some glass. Press a button. Then boom. An image of what I saw is captured. Calculating the weight of another planet. My dumbass just can't comprehend the mathematics that go into working that out. All of the planets have moons orbiting or with orbited spacecraft around them. You can get a really good approximation of the mass of a planet by measuring the orbital period of anything orbiting it, and knowing the average distance of that object orbiting. You can mostly ignore the mass of the moon as long as the moon is a fair bit smaller than the planet, and still get a really good approximation. Use the formula. M equals 4 pi to a 3, GT2. A equals semi-major axis of the orbit in meters, average distance. G equals gravitational constant equals 6.673 x 10-11 m3 kg1s2. T equals orbital period in seconds. M equals mass of planet in kg. Example. Moon Io takes 152,853 seconds to orbit Jupiter at an average distance of 421,700 kilometers. Ignoring Io's mass gives a calculated mass of Jupiter of mass equals 1.899 x 1027 kilograms. The Fugia pufferfish contains the world's most powerful neurotoxin. But if you cut that sucker just right, you get tasty fish that sells for $100 a plate. And the best chefs will be able to taint the meat with just enough tetrodotoxin to give the diner a vague sense of tingling, but not die. Since 1958, Fugu chefs must earn a license to prepare and sell fugu to the public. This involves a 2 or 3 year apprenticeship. The licensing examination process consists of a written test, a fish identification test, and a practical test, which requires the test takers to prepare a dish of fugu and eating it. Only about 35% of the applicants pass. Small miscalculations result in failure or, in rare cases, death. I only know about this dish due to that Simpsons episode. Anything that becomes edible only after several steps, like a mushroom you have to boil twice. What was it discovered by a murderer on a budget who used the same poison mushroom in 3 pots of tea? Cover it in lye, bury it in the ground for a month, then it should be good to eat. This fish is deadly except this one tiny bit. So like, plants that are normally poisonous or just injure humans in general? Who was like, dang, that thing looks kinda tasty. I might have to eat that. What gets me are the plants that are poisonous until you boil them 3 or 4 times, changing the water each time. Like, how do you get to attempt number 4 at cooking the same pot of greens after the first 3 attempts poisoned your family? Hunger. I know. But I still think I would have given up by then. Imaginary numbers in math. That's something that we never really figured out. So we invented imaginary numbers to just kinda make sense of certain things. I always imagine it went like this. The equation won't balance unless I throw in a root -1. And I can't do that. But we don't get the grant if we don't solve the equation. And a week later, a paper on imaginary numbers is published. Tapioca pudding. Raw cassava is poisonous, cyanide, but if you peel it and grind it down it makes tapioca pudding. So how did that happen? How did a person figure out that after cooking it was okay? So maybe some tribe was starving and sitting by a fire and a cassava tuber fell in the fire, and after it cooked they said, "Duck it. I'm gonna peel it and eat it." A mystery to me. To be fair, it doesn't make tapioca pudding. It makes tapioca. Which drugs to do? Trial and error. Oysters. They look like rocks on the outside and snot on the inside. Who was the first fool to open and eat that? Someone that watched a bird do it. Earlier today I was going through this exact subreddit. Someone asked for some not so fun facts. And someone commented a goat apparently has the most resemblance to humans when it comes to the vagina. Don't like how he had to add apparently. Yeah. They taste completely different. Laser eye surgery. I mean, some people must have gone blind. I like the first eye surgery was some guy cutting people's corneas out, taking them home, reshaping them on a mini lathe, then going back to the hospital and reattaching them. If you're going from that to using lasers to do the same cutting, you just have to get the laser at the right power to not burn too much cornea away, which you could do with a similar material, or bodies donated for medical science. I'd much rather be laser beamed than have some guy drop my cornea on the floor in his shed. Honey. Imagine asking yourself, what do this little stingy insects hiding from me? It must taste good. Just follow the honey badger. Sailing upwind. Sailing with the wind is one thing, but how did they ever figure out how to design a boat capable of sailing upwind is beyond me. I understand the physics of why it works, however it still baffles me that humans figured that out as early as they did. Well, you have a boat and a sail and then you play around with it. A friend showed me a video on a building that was discovered buried under sand in Spain. I think it was in Spain. Can't remember what it is called. But one of the buildings was so immensely beautiful and detailed. Even the tiled floor had paintings on it that had been preserved over time. Just boggles my mind. They even had an amazing plumbing system and other things you'd never thought was possible for the era it was built. I'll have to find the documentary and link it, it's amazing. Milk cheese. Humans were pretty much all lactose intolerant for a long time. Only babies could really drink milk because of feeding. So at some point, people just said duck it and brute forced milk into adults' diets. Created cheese and ate so much that a significant portion of the world can now drink it as adults. Even modern lactose intolerant people just do not give a duck and still drink milk and cheese products. We can't figure out climate change. But goddamn we can suck on a cow's tit. Mayo, this is 100x better than my comment about milk. That you're reading this after I zapped it out of my thoughts through my fingers. Past the keyboard. Under the wire. And out your display at light speed into your thoughts. Everything that made this moment possible. It's more believable when you lived in a world that didn't have it at all and just saw TV and radio and radar and then saw transistor radios. Then saw color TVS. Then saw rocket land on the moon. Then saw pocket calculators and digital watches. Then saw space invaders and asteroids. Then saw a home computer the size of a ducking Samsonite suitcase. Then saw MS-DOS Flight Simulator. Then saw Doom and Wolfenstein 3D. Then saw cassette tape drives and telephone modems and flywheel printers. Then saw a teletype machine. Then saw Nintendo and the first LCD screens. Then saw a cell phone the size of a shoebox. Then saw LAN setup, then a thing called the World Wide Web. And then saw 56k modems and AOL. And saw the creation of spam, so much spam and viruses. Glass. Who the duck would just melt sand. Found out that glass was made after a campfire was on top of some sand and it made glass. How to make metal. Like seriously, how does the thought, hey, if I put this rock in a fire I can melt it and make a decent tool even occur if the very concept hasn't been invented yet? Well, it took ages to figure out how to work different metals. Like copper, bronze, iron. I will never understand computers. How the duck is it even possibly to lightning charge a rock and make it think? The way you put it sounds so badass. Any recipe that calls for a pinch of another ingredient. I mean, will the whole pot be ruined if you don't add that pinch? Bay leaf. Too much can ruin a huge pot of chicken soup, at least in my opinion. Turning metals, minerals, stone and sand into a tiny chip that calculates shitload faster than my brain. The entirety of chemistry and all its subunits that dive deeper into the subject that is chem, ochem, inorganic chem. To have the existence of everything presented in such an organized fashion is fascinating. How the hell did someone determine that mixing eggs, milk, flour and sugar would make a cake? How did that guy figure this out? Pretty much anything relating to nuclear physics, power, weapons etc. Also, Muslim scholars performing cataract surgery and mapping the human anatomy in ways that would make Da Vinci shit a brick. More bizarre that they figured these things out about 1000 years ago. Bicycles. Those things have no right to stay upright. It took a lot of experimentation to make them easy enough to ride. And now they're everywhere. I've always wanted to know the story behind the first ever BJ. Don't think it was very tough to figure out. People put all kinds of shit in their mouth. I would like to know who stepped in his milk, let it ferment, left it for months, and then decided to eat it. Beaver butt juice being used for vanilla flavoring. Can't imagine the thought process that led to that. Barometric pressure. Still can't wrap my head around the discovery of phosphorus. Brand thought human urine could produce gold via alchemy, so what did he do? He went to a bunch of pubs and collected and distilled shitloads of piss. After a while it started to glow. Oh, and sometimes it would just randomly ducking ignite. Mind-boggling. Which mushrooms were non-poisonous? Brain tanning hides to make leather. You kill an animal. Scrap off its fat meat. Soak it in lye. Scrap it some more. Rinse it and rub its own brains on it until it's soft and then put it in some smoke. If you do too little or too much of some steps it can completely mess the whole thing up. Dark matter. Mass of every single element and radius of atoms each by each. How? Why and how? The first person to ever try durian fruit. What in the world would possess someone to open it, smell it and say, yeah, this goes into my mouth? What in the world would possess someone to open it, smell it and say, yeah, this goes into my mouth? Starvation. Cigarettes weed. Like who the duck was like, see this plant, let's dry cut it, burn it and inhale it because why not? This campfire makes me feel funny. Let's burn that plant again. Wonder what was going through someone's head when they first saw an egg come out a chicken's ass and decided they'd try and crack it open, cook it, and eat it. Lots of animals eat eggs from other animals. Just watch any of those primitive technology shows on YouTube. It's amazing to think how they figured out these intricate processes to make things with just simple natural materials. It's crazy. Ducking like and subscribe.